We're excited to share with you a very special guest. I'm going to do a quick biography. I'm reading from my phone just to make sure I get it right. There's so much goodness to share. Courtland Warren is an authentic, relevant thought leader and master facilitator in large group awareness training with over 10,000 hours of public speaking. On stage, he looms as an intriguing combination of power, humor, and empathy. Courtland's certitude stems from his stated purpose to create people's beliefs about what they're capable of being. To recreate people's beliefs about what they are capable of being. Born and raised in Oklahoma, he saw education as a path to experiencing more of the world. With this view, Courtland has blazed the trail from his Main Street neighborhood to South Africa, the United Kingdom, and across North America, leveraging intelligence, charisma, and voice. Regardless of the audience size, Courtland has an uncanny ability to connect, knowing each person listens and hears as an individual. Courtland studied organizational behavior and graduated from Oklahoma State University. And after a short stint in the oil and gas industry, he was inspired for the need of diversity and inclusion in corporate America and has added value to industry titans, including Coca-Cola, UPS, General Electric, Keller Williams, Kimberly-Clark, and Chick-fil-A. Almost 20 years ago, Courtland dedicated his focus to transformational speaker and workshop facilitator and is known as a pertinent contributor to empowering people to raise their resilience quotient for living a meaningful life. Courtland, I hope that was a great introduction. I hope it encompasses what you're here to share with us today, but I'm so excited for you to be here.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm just so humbled and grateful, and to you and to those listening. I understand that the most precious asset that we have is our time, and so for the attention that your audience is lending, I'm grateful, and my objective is not to waste it, but to add some value in the time that we'll spend together. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So welcome. So welcome. And so let's dive in for them. I know the calling of entrepreneurship. Let's talk about this for everyone listening. How do they know when it's a real calling? Because I think some of us kind of have the feeling of like, oh, I could do that. Or
Right.
I would do that better if I was them. But how do they know when it's actually a calling and not just a random thought?
When I think that it's a calling when it stops being something that you're just curious about or something that you're just interested in. When it moves beyond that would be a nice idea. When it gets to the place that you're losing sleep at night because you're tussling with where am I, and where do I have the potential to be? That gap. There's a gap that exists for all of us. I think every single problem has that characteristic. There is what's reality and what's possible. And that gap that exists, when that tug becomes something that I can no longer endure or tolerate, but it's a gap that I desire to close, to me, then it moves from just an opportunity to the actual calling. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And tell me more about that gap. That's an interesting, piece you just acknowledged there. Because oftentimes I believe people have a vision of who they think they could be. And like you said, it might just be a random feeling, but at some point that calling connects and they realize there's a gap. Like if I look at who I want to be and who I am, that doesn't match. What do they do? What can they do about it?
It's I believe that a lot of what's great in the world today, particularly what entrepreneurs do. My affinity and love for entrepreneurship and for entrepreneurs is that entrepreneurs are people who begin to work on ideas before the masses even know it's possible. They're laughed at often, criticized often. That journey that they take, the road that they take, is one that is not convenient, nor is it comfortable. And so it's like, do you have the stuff to be able to be laughed at long enough for the laughter to turn into applause? Can you weather the mediocrity and the comfort that others have chosen, that false sense of security that others have chosen, and go out and build something that frankly those who've laughed at you will benefit from. It is a service orientation, and that gap that exists is, if you or I or anyone listening, we take any problem in the world. It could be a global problem. It could be a problem that you're having in a relationship or with your finances or whatever the case may be. Any problem, it exists because of the dissatisfaction there is between what is reality and what is possible. And I believe that we must first begin to explore the dissatisfaction. Okay, it is the dissatisfaction that oftentimes leads to the new discovery. Oftentimes in personal development, what happens is, and I get it, we're taught, just be grateful. You're feeling dissatisfied. Well, just make a list of all the things you're grateful for. And I get that. But I also believe that there is power in the dissatisfaction, because the dissatisfaction will lend itself to or lead us to what can be new, what's the new possibility. And so that gap that exists because we're designed for growth, right? We're designed for ever increasing expansion. And there is the fallacy of comfort. We oftentimes retreat back to comfort because there's this false idea that where I'm comfortable, I'm in control. Where I'm comfortable, things are predictable, until there's a global pandemic and all of a sudden my comfort has been disturbed. So, in the world that we live in, Jarek, it's like, we're essentially, we go around shaking people out of their comfort, right? Not a very popular gig sometimes, right? To wake people out of their sleep. Can you imagine that, right? Just being the person who goes around waking people out of their sleep, right? And sometimes they wake up and they're grumpy, and sometimes they wake up and they're like, "Thank you for waking me up, thank you for being my alarm." Essentially, though, what's happening is we're saying, look at those places where you're dissatisfied. The first step, I believe, in entrepreneurship is not what are you passionate about. I mean, that can work, but really, it's when you look out into the world. What's a problem that you believe needs to be solved? And then what is a contribution, or what can you do from your life experiences? What is something that you can do or contribute to solving that problem? That, to me, is where entrepreneurs really rest. They look out into the world. There's an outward focus component here, where it's not just go build a business so I can have a lifestyle. It's not just go build a business so I can be famous or so my name is on the building. It really starts in earnest when I look out and I'm able to say, there's a problem, and I believe that there's a way that I can contribute to solving it. Okay. And so that gap that exists between what's real, what's reality, and what's possible, our desire to close that is what sparks, growth and transformation. And it requires a high level of resilience in order to do that.
I see that. Question: what was the original problem that you saw? So you said 20 years to that overnight success. What was the original problem that caught your attention when you got that calling towards entrepreneurship?
I say that in jest, right? So many times it's like, man, that person pops on the scene, they're overnight success, but they didn't see the 20 years and hours and hours and hours of grinding and hustling as an unknown, right? But for me, Jarek, it is the problem that I saw was that way too many people were silenced. Too many people with wonderful ideas who, through their life experiences, have been convinced either by other people or by themselves that what they had to say and what they had to offer was not enough. I see, too many people with great ideas, with wonderful insights and brilliant minds. These are people who, for whatever reason, have questions of whether or not they're good enough. Are they deserving? Are they worthy? For me, I'm humbled by the opportunity today, but frankly, it doesn't seem like that long ago when I was, just a kid in Southeast Oklahoma, small town. Idabel, Oklahoma. Shout out to Idabel, and a town with about 7,000 people. The railroad tracks. If you did like a Google Earth and you zoomed in on Idabel, Oklahoma, there are these railroad tracks that separate the city, divide the city, the town, and east and west. And growing up, it felt like all of the things that were good were happening on the opposite side of town than where I lived. And as a
Mm,
kid, call it, I mean, I say God, but I felt this uneasiness about there being some who had and others who didn't. And my question very early on became, why do some achieve and others don't? When I looked
mm,
across the tracks, it seemed like everything there was good and positive.
yeah.
McDonald's was on that side of town. The golf course was on that side of town. The grocery store was on that side of town. When my mom had to pay bills, it was on that side of town. And so it felt like there were the haves and the have-nots. And
Mm,
we were in the have-not line. What I wanted to be able to do was figure out, how do you change lines? If there are only the haves and have-nots and you're in the have-not line, how do you change lines? That was the problem that I wanted to figure out, and then share with people that there is a way. Like, there is
yeah.
not this esoteric being who sits high and looks low and is choosing who gets to have a wonderful life. And Jarek, you get to win, and Courtland, you get to struggle. And Susan, it's going to be okay for you, but Mary, it's going to be difficult, right? That's not what happens. But my belief, younger, that as a kid, that was the belief that
Mm,
there's nothing that can be done. There's nothing that we can do about this. And so I started to say, well, if that's true, then why even exist? And so that's how I dove into personal development. I started reading the personal development books. My book reports in 10th grade and 11th grade were my 11th grade. I had in the 11th grade. I did a book report on how to win friends and influence people, and no one got it except my teacher. Like, how do you know about that book? And so that was the place that started to kind of reveal some answers, maybe. Okay.
yeah.
But that was the problem I wanted to solve, is like, there are brilliant minds that are held captive because they're looking to fit in, when in truth, who they are now is enough. Nothing's missing. And they just need to understand or know that what they have to offer the world is worthy, and they're deserving of being the person who delivers it.
Yeah. And so walk me through it. You started getting into some books, you started learning about this. How did you cross that line? What were some of
It's
the key distinctions, the key moments? What helped you actually take? Because I think there's a lot of people out there who feel that way. Clearly, in
Mhm.
society nowadays, there's a haves and haves not conversation happening. And the
Mhm.
way a lot of young people are dealing with it right now are, well, that's unfair. That's
Mm,
unfair. That's not fair that they get to have it and we don't. And because
mm.
it's unfair, we're going to be upset about it. We're going to riot, we're going to protest, we're going to just we want to burn down the system
Take
because the system isn't fair.
Yeah. Well, there is something to be said about this idea of wanting something that I'm not willing to pay the price for.
Hmm.
So in my view, the desire for a thing without the willingness to pay the price
Yeah.
is greed in its highest form. I
Yeah.
want it. I don't want to pay the price for it, so I'll take yours.
Yeah.
That's greed. Um,
Mm.
what is also true is that there is a lot of frustration out
Yeah.
of from not knowing. So I
Yeah.
oftentimes say that choice is a function of awareness. So I
Mm.
can't judge you for the choice you made until or
Yeah.
unless I know what options you are aware of, right?
Oof.
So it is, I remember being in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I had there was the, organized tours, but I had a
Yeah.
local, take me around Johannesburg and Soweto, and from the big, the De Beers Diamond building is, you can see it from Soweto. And he was explaining to me how that little train system, one way in, one way out during, apartheid and so forth. And it was just before the World Cup, and they were building this huge stadium there in Johannesburg. And the driver was telling me, he said, well, he was explaining to me how the young people would come out at night and they would lay this contraption across the road with nails in it, and so that cars would go flat, and then they would go and rob them or take from them and so forth. And I'm listening to that, and I was like, wow, okay. And I was like, well, there's a difference, between crime and survival. Like if my grandmother, she's deceased now, but she was a person who I would do anything for if it meant that she got to live. And some would look at it and say, that's crime, but for those kids in Soweto, they didn't take anyone's life, right? That was survival, but that's not the case for most people. For most people, we're not in situations where, that's required, right? It's more of, okay, what are the options that I know are available? And so what I have found, and particularly in being able to change lines, number one is environment. I believe that the number one influence on you a person being able to change lines is environment. Not only who do you find yourself around, but what do you read? What do you listen to? What informs your decisions? Whether that's the music that you listen to, the television shows that you watch, the podcast that you listen to, the people on social media that you follow, all of those things are impacting your environment, the head space that is being created. Number one is environment. And so in being able to change lines, the first thing I had to do was recognize that just because I was from a place did not mean I had to stay in a place. Just because I was from there and I have an affinity for being raised there and who my family is, and that'll always be the case, an affinity for them as family. But just because that's where I was born and just because that's where I was raised, that doesn't mean, and just because it's where I lived, it doesn't mean that that's where I have to stay. So number one is environment. Number two, beyond environment, it is the willingness to act. A lot in personal development over the years, there's this law of attraction idea. And I believe that we are fields of vibration. I believe that we operate on certain frequencies. Our emotions and feelings, beliefs inform that frequency of vibration, and we attract into our lives the things that fit that frequency of vibration. True. However, when we look at the word attraction, there's the word attract, but there's also the main word action. And we will bring into our lives in proportion to the action that we take. So, I believe it was Einstein who said, nothing happens until something moves. So from environment, then my environment will inform the new actions that I take. And then from environment to action, then it's feedback and my relationship to feedback. It is, I believe it was Ken Blanchard who said, feedback is the breakfast of champions, right? So one of the things that I had to do, because I had a way of taking feedback very personally, I'll just admit that, because I always heard feedback as you're doing this wrong. And I interpreted wrong, or I processed wrong as inadequate, less than, not worthy, not deserving. And I became defensive. And so I created a world where I could be doing it wrong or not effectively. And no one would really, they wouldn't tell me because they didn't want to set me off. They didn't want to, I don't want to ruffle his feathers. So I had to change my relationship to feedback. And from the feedback, then I also note that highly successful people They have a very healthy relationship with results. So it's, my results are not who I am, but what I created. So I can look at a result and I could be dissatisfied with it, but I got to first true up and be honest with what is, because and own the result that I created. So the reason why ownership is important is because I cannot change what I'm unwilling to own. If I don't own
Hmm.
it, I can't change it. So back to, and the young people that you were speaking to about earlier, and I would say it's not just young people, right? It's, that the resentment and the envy that resides in, from, all age ranges, for resentment and envy towards people who frankly have more than I have. It's in every age category. But one of the things I know is that if I don't own it, then I can never change it. And so if it's not me who owns it, then I've got to wait for someone else to do something different before my life can be different.
Yeah.
So it's, I think it goes, environment, and then, what action am I willing to take from that action? What feedback do I get? Being able to process the feedback to go into action again through being honest. I'm going to get some wins
Yeah.
along the way. Okay, so I'll start to see some things happening the way I want it to happen, and then from
Yep.
there, it's very important to celebrate the small wins. Right. The reason why it's important to celebrate the small wins is because there again, I am a being who attracts according to my frequency of vibration, and the
Mhm.
conscious awareness of vibration is what a feeling is. So the
Yeah.
more I celebrate the small wins, then I attract more. It's
Yeah.
likely that a lot of your listeners are types of are high achieving people, and what typically happens is for high achievers, it's like when things go well, it's that was kind of expected. Well, someone congratulates them. Congratulates you. Oh, it's no big deal. Uh, it was nothing, right? And then when something doesn't go the way I wanted it to go, they're self-critical, beat themselves up. Ah, gosh, that was stupid. Oh, what was I thinking? And I want everyone to hear this. Whatever you emotionalize, you get more of. So
Hmm.
if you're a person who gets highly emotional when it doesn't go the way you want it to go, but you are pretty numb or nonchalant when you do get the win,
Mhm.
understand that you will draw into your life more of what you emotionalize. So by not emotionalizing the victories along the way, you actually delay the success. Okay,
Hmm.
so I think that it is a way. It's not, it's a framework that I use. It's not the framework. It's one that I use, but it starts with change in environment, knowing
Yeah.
that there's action that I got to take, being open to feedback, and truing up to and taking ownership of what I've created. Then,
Yep.
back to action, celebrate more, and that cycles then into achieving more of what I wanted.
I love that. I love that. And some people might come back with, well, how do I change the environment? I'll give you a real time example and we can talk
Okay.
through it. And I'll send her this when we're done because she's in the
Okay.
struggle right now.
Okay.
She's a medical student. She lives in Germany. She had this person she was dating. They moved in together. She's going to medical school. Everything
Mhm.
was working out. All of a sudden, the relationship fell apart, and now her parents have decided not to support her financially through school anymore. And she's at a moment where it's like, what do I do? I'm
Mm.
stuck.
Mhm.
I'm screwed. I can use the language. It's pretty graphic, but like, ugh, I'm
Hey.
now in this stuck. And now, so from the there's two sides of this. There's the first side where most people are gonna look at that and be like, wait a minute, you've been supported through medical school and you had a relationship and everything was being funded. Like, oh, first world problems.
Mhm.
There's that
Mhm.
side of
Mhm.
it. But then there's the reality. That is a big freaking problem. Like, you
Yeah.
don't know where rent's going to come from. You don't know how you're going to survive. You don't know what you're going to do. You spend all this time getting into medical school. You've been working at it. You feel like you're almost there, but life is now throwing you a real test. And I'll
Mm.
throw this out there for people. I always believe the closer you get to the result, you might be tested. You might not.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's smooth, but generally tests show up in life. And what its life is saying is, do you really want it, or are you just interested? Are you fully
Mm.
committed to getting that medical degree? Are you fully committed to transforming who you are from a non-physician to a physician? Are you willing to make that step? Or another thing Courtland said earlier, are you willing to pay that price to get there? Or because life threw an obstacle in the way, are you no longer willing to pay the price? Because it got a
Mm.
little harder, are you no longer willing to do what it takes? Because things are different than what you thought they would be in your head. You don't know if it's worth it anymore. That's a
Mm.
big question.
Mm.
And so if we were going to give feedback to her, we might say, I asked her, she messaged me and I messaged her back and I said, okay, you tried step one, which was ask for help to your parents. They said no. What's
Okay.
step two? And she
Mm.
wrote back, I
Mm.
don't have a step two. And I was
Oh,
like, you
okay.
better come up with one or life's going to kick you in the face pretty hard in 30 days or less, called kicking you out of your apartment. Like, you need a
Yeah.
step two. And
Yeah.
this is that moment where either she's going to, like you were saying, either she's going to get dissatisfied and say, gosh darn it, I'm going to figure this out. Or
Mhm.
life is going to help her become dissatisfied by kicking her out of an apartment and leaving her in a place where she has no other option.
Right.
And so that
That's
piece,
so good.
though, that you're saying is step one would be change the environment. Now,
Mhm.
I'm going to bring this together and then pass it back to you for a second.
I love it. I love it. I'm loving it.
I
I'm like,
can almost assume that when we say change the environment, she's going to throw her arms in the air and say, what can I do? I don't have any money, and it takes money to do anything. And I go, no, no, no. You are chatting with me from Germany on the other side of Earth right now. You have a phone that accesses the internet. If you have the
mhm.
internet and a phone, you're way more advanced than most. Take that internet and phone and figure out your options. I mean, my gosh, if you're even uncreative, go to Chat GPT and say, what are options to make enough money to pay X amount of rent in the next 30 days? And let it come up with options for you. But part of
Mm.
what we're doing is exactly what Courtland said, which is changing the environment, getting out of our head saying, I
Mhm.
don't know what to do, and getting out into a different environment, a digital
Mm.
environment. I would start
Mhm.
listening to podcasts of people who were homeless but had to figure it out. I'd get around people and listen to their books. Someone from went to zero to a huge organization they
Mhm.
built. I'd find
Mhm.
someone who's gone through the struggle and figure out what they did, so
Mm.
you have a
Mm.
formula to follow. Doesn't mean it's going to be
Right.
perfect, doesn't mean it'll work for everybody, but at least you have the first couple steps of someone who's already done it. One of my mentors said the stupidest way to learn anything in life is trial and error. If you can
Mm.
learn through someone else's journey, my gosh, you get 10 years of their life in 10 minutes of listening to a YouTube show. Like, you get
Right.
10, a whole lifetime, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years of a lifetime in 200 pages. My
Right.
gosh, there's a treasure if you can just get into that environment of the book, the video, the podcast, whatever the element of access is, but get into the environment. Now I'm
Mm.
going to ask Courtland. I know you started picking up Think and Grow Rich.
Mhm.
Hold on. What would your tips be first? And then I want to go to, how did the environment spawn you to action, and what actions did you first take? But I'm going
Okay.
to pass it back to you.
I
Feedback
like
for this young
I like
student.
just so you know, this was the part of this that I was most excited about. It's just like where I get to just listen to you too, because I'm like, yo, that's so good, right? So we were saying about experience, right? Experience is the best teacher, but it doesn't have to be your experience, right? This is essentially what you're saying, right? I can learn from the experiences of other people.
Yeah.
The person that you're talking about, the client that you're speaking of in Germany, hopefully she's listening in, and the word of encouragement I would have for her is, and for all of us, is this: that transformation requires that a price be paid.
That's right.
That is not a Jarek rule. That is not a Courtland rule. That's a life rule. that in
Yeah.
order for anything to transform, a price must be paid. The lump of coal does not become a diamond without the pressure that earth applies to it. It is the caterpillar becoming a butterfly. The caterpillar does not become a butterfly without first displaying the wing strength to break out of a cocoon. If you and I were on a hike one day and we saw there on the end of a branch or a twig, we see the butterfly morphing, or this caterpillar morphing into a butterfly, and we kind of see it struggling in the cocoon, and we decide, oh man, look at that little pretty little butterfly. It's so close. And I take out a pocket knife and I open the cocoon just a little bit, right? So that I think that I'm setting the butterfly free, but actually I just crippled it, because nature has it set up that until it displays the wing strength enough to break through the cocoon, then it doesn't get to fly. The reason why that's important for the butterfly is because a butterfly's defense mechanism against predators is its chaotic flight pattern. You never know where a butterfly is going. It's chaotic. So it needs strong wing strength in order to do that. Perhaps you are in that same situation where it seems like all around you things are falling apart. And to Jarek's point, what if you saw it as this is the final test? Like, I am on this hero's journey, and this is that crucible. It is time to cross that chasm. I am right there. Everything I've wanted, everything I dreamed of, it's right there. And what if you saw it as this is that final test? If I get through this, I get my dream. If I get through it, if I find a way, and it doesn't matter how I finish. I don't have to finish with my makeup pretty. I don't have to finish with my hair done. Obviously, I'm talking out of turn there because I don't have any hair, right? I don't have to finish it looking a certain way. I just have to finish. I just have to figure out a way to get through this. And transformation requires that of all of us, right? And so that would be when we talk about changing the environment. Primarily what Jarek and I are, I believe, agreeing on is a lot of times the environment that we're speaking about is the one in your head, and that one can always be modified and changed. That environment, man, I want to change my environment, and so I want to go to Fiji, and I don't have the money to go to Fiji. I guess then I can't change my environment. No. We always have control over what we're thinking about, and because thoughts become things, then I am always actually in control of my environment, because I can control what I'm thinking about through the power of imagination. Only human beings have that capacity to think independent of current reality. That's your superpower. Only human beings can do that. Only human beings can think independent of reality, meaning I could be going through the worst times financially and be imagining what it's going to be like when I have the liberty and abundance that I desire. I could be just going through the worst breakup and still be imagining what it's going to be like when I have love in my life again. Only human beings can do that. So I can't tell you what to do. I would encourage you not to surrender your superpower when things are tough. What if it's that final stage, the final leg before your dream is realized, right? What if then? What if that was the case? So reframing is a way of changing the environment. As far
one
as
thought if I could throw in one thought real quick to go along with what you're saying.
Sure, of course you can. You can throw in whatever you.
Changing your environment is also so digitally, mentally, physically, who you're hanging around. If you think about it, when I was blessed to be able to go to university. And when I was there were kids whose parents paid for everything, and they had a credit card with some god awful unlimited amount of whatever they could buy in their car and all this stuff. And then I never forget, there was a woman in one of my classes with me that was a single mom. She worked 2 jobs. She took 18 units a semester and she was
Mm,
getting straight A's.
mm,
And I was like,
mhm,
who are you? And how do I hang out with you? Because what you're doing, everyone else here thinks is impossible, including me. Like I was taking
mm.
15 units and doing pretty good, but not straight A's and not with 2 jobs and a daughter. I was
Right,
like,
right.
how do you do that? What magic superpowers do you have? And it wasn't
Mm,
superpowers. She was just dedicated and committed to doing what it takes to get her degree in the way she wanted to do it. She was willing to pay the price. And I asked
bingo.
her, I'm like, how are you in class right now? Where is your child? And she's like, oh, we're blessed. The university provides, child care when you're specifically in class. So she's like, I drop off my daughter. I come straight to class. I go right back and pick her up afterwards. And I was like, and when do you work? She's like, well, I
Mm,
have this situation where my daughter goes to bed and then I go to work all night and then I come back and study. I'm like, when do you study? Like my
mm,
brain was just exploding with every speed bump she was navigating. But it was life.
mm.
Life kept throwing stuff in front of her. And she was like, whoop, 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 just
Yeah,
zagging and zigging around it, just making her way to the result she was committed to getting no matter what. And
no
then I
matter
went and
what.
talked to these other kids. And I remember there was a kid in my school that got kicked out in orientation week. He didn't
Mm,
even make it to class to get kicked out. And this
wow.
kid had a great background, very wealthy parents, came, showed up with his own car and all this stuff on the first day. And he made some really, really stupid decisions during orientation week and got kicked out of school before it even started. And I look at the difference, and those are kind of the 2 lines. You look at those
Yeah,
lines of like,
yeah,
how did this woman take on childcare, 2 jobs, 18 units, and still kick ass at everything, at least from my perception? She didn't feel that
right.
way, but in my eyes,
Mhm.
she was superstar achiever, winning in every category of life. If you can do all
Mm.
that, you're dominating life. She,
It
like you said,
dominates.
though, she felt like she was struggling. And I was like,
Yeah.
struggling? You're killing it. You are setting the standard of possibility around here, at least in
It's
my eyes.
well, I think it's and you know this and have taught it, to many more people than I have, but I think it really comes down to the why, because how often have we heard it stated, right? When the why is big enough, you'll figure out how. A
Yeah.
reason for achieving it. And so as a practical, actionable thing that anyone listening can do would be
Yep.
to write out why the dream is important to you. Why do you
Yep.
want it? Because it will inevitably get difficult. If it's worth anything at all, you will be tested. And no
That's right.
one gets exonerated from the struggle. I used to believe, I used to believe that only people, of my skin color and tone were the people struggling. Now, part of that was
Mm.
just my naivete as a youth. Those railroad tracks separated East and West, but it also separated black and white and, money and no money, at least in my view at the time. So
Yep.
part of my conditioning was that only these people struggle. Okay. But I have come to learn how ignorant that was, how naive that was of me. No one gets exonerated from the struggle. It feels like when you're going through it, you're the only one. And it's
Mm.
relative, right? It's relative. When I'm going through it, it's the worst that it could possibly be. No one's ever had to go through what I've had to go through. I had that
Yep.
story as well. And then I would find people, or I would read about people who had it worse off than I did, and they still made a way. So
Yep.
one of the things that I think as a practical, actionable thing that you can do is write down your whys. So if it's a child, see their name written down in ink. If it's for a parent or aging parents or yourself, the organization that you want to contribute to, like we've got to know, Jarek, and I think it's really important. We've got to know who loses if we don't win.
That's right.
So if I don't win, who else loses? Because it's not just
Yep.
me. Like if I don't go figure this out, if I don't go make this happen, then that's a loss for my children. That's a loss for my mom and how I want to, the things that I want to do for her as she ages. And most importantly, it's a loss to the people who will be impacted by what I share and the value that I add. So it's who loses if you don't win, and see that. And if it doesn't move you, if it doesn't inspire you to do it, even on the days when you don't feel like it, then perhaps you're chasing a dream that's not yours. And I see a lot of people doing that. A lot of times their resistance is because there's no ownership in the pursuit. There's no ownership in the dream itself, right? But this, the single mom, 18 units, working 2 jobs, still making straight A's, ultimately had a why.
Yeah.
And
I'll add something to what you're saying as well. Who loses if I don't succeed? But here's a fun one. I saw a quote that said, if all your prayers was answered, who else would benefit besides yourself?
So who wins when I win?
Who wins when you win? Who are you going to win for? Who are you going to win with? What will change in the world because you've won?
Yeah.
You get what you want. You get to say, oh, I'm happy and I got everything I wanted out of life. Life ain't going to give you that. No offense, but life doesn't care. Like when you get that motivation is when you start fighting for something much more than yourself. And that goes back to the reflection of who loses if I lose. It also comes into the reflection of who wins if I win. For most people, the only person that wins if they win is themselves, which is why they're not winning.
Which is why they're not winning.
That's why they're not winning. Because they're the only beneficiary of them winning. If you winning now benefits your team, their families, their community, the world around you, society as a whole, you'll start winning a whole hell of a lot more really quick. But for most people, the reason they're struggling is because they're focused on their own win and not the win of what ripples into the world around them.
That is perhaps the most profound statement I've heard in a long time. A lot of people aren't winning because the only person who would benefit from them winning is them.
That's right.
That's major. I mean, that's good stuff.
Right.
That's good stuff.
If you were on a sports team and the only person you're trying to impress is your own stats, I guarantee your team is going to lose.
You're losing. Yeah, we see that in sports a lot. Yeah,
it doesn't work. Yeah. And I'll go back to this young woman who wins by her getting her medical degree. Right now, as far as I can understand, I might be wrong. I'm always in this willing to accept being wrong here. But in my observation, the reason she's so upset is she's not getting what she wants out of life. It's not happening the way she wants it to for her reasons. Now, she wants to be a doctor because I'm guessing she wants to help people, which is wonderful and beautiful. But what happens is when you say, I don't know how to figure this out, and you say, you know what? Someone's life depends on me graduating and being there when they need me. All of a sudden you go, shit, I need to graduate. You're like, I don't have any money. I'm gonna figure that out. All of a sudden someone's life is on the line. All of a sudden a child needs you. All of a sudden the world needs you. All of a sudden, like, there's much more than just you that's going to benefit from you winning. But the only reason you're not winning is the only person lined up to benefit is you right now. You have to expand who's going to win when you win.
Right. It's likely that there are, it's expanding the vision, right? That's back to environment. It's expanding the vision. If I can only see that it's benefiting me, then I remain stuck, right? We've seen the story, you read the stories of, the mom who lifts a car or does a person does something superhuman because their child was at stake and they were able to muster strength that they didn't know they had, right? Yeah. It's the more our win, and I love this, the more our win impacts more people, the more fuel and energy we have to do what it takes. So
That's right.
look out, and to that person becoming a nurse or a doctor, or that entrepreneur who's hesitant to start their business and launch the business. Like, consider the lives that will benefit from you displaying the courage. That's very,
Yep.
very, very
If you
profound. Thank
wanted
you.
a for people watching, if you wanted a worksheet or something to draw a
Mhm.
circle in the middle of a page, just a small circle, and write you or me or whatever it is. Draw a picture of yourself. Draw out 5 spokes and put who are the 5 people closest to you that will benefit if you achieve the goal that you're going after. If you can't
Mm,
think of anyone, you got to rewrite what you're going after
right.
or how you're doing it or what it's going to represent. But who are the 5 people closest to you that will benefit from you succeeding at what you're going after? From
Mm,
that, draw 5 spokes from each one of those people and say, how will 5 people benefit by these people benefiting by me achieving this goal?
mm,
And all of a
okay.
sudden, you
Okay.
see how you benefit. You see how these first 5 benefit. You see how these next 5 times 5, 25 people are going to benefit. If you want to get crazy, draw one more spoke of 5. And all of a sudden, 25 times 5, you're going to be at 125. You're going to
Uh-huh.
see how you achieving this one goal in your life will affect the 125, 150, 155 people closest to you in your life. And that's a different level of motivation. That's a
That's
different
a
level
different
of
level.
insight saying, wow, if I make this happen, here's the 125 humans or 155
Mhm.
humans who will directly benefit because I do this. Now,
Because I
for
do it.
most
Now it's
people,
even.
I hate to warn you, you're going to struggle coming up with the 5 people who are going to benefit from you hitting your goal.
Mm,
And I
mm,
tell you, that is the reason you're struggling.
mm.
It's the reason. When you can clearly articulate in your brain how by me doing this, these 155 people, at bare minimum, 155 people are going to directly benefit from me doing this, you'll find the motivation, you'll find the creativity, you'll find the insight, you'll figure out how to get there. It just happens. I've got a
That is,
whole group of street kids in Uganda that benefit from me doing well every month because we feed all of them. We have 2
mm,
schools that we've built around the world of filled with kids learning because we worked hard. We have family members
mhm,
who depend on us besides just my immediate wife and son. We had
mm.
there's layers and layers and layers. And what I've learned is the more I'm able to help beyond ourselves and our own family and our own community,
Mhm.
the better we do.
Better we do.
Significantly better, not just a little better. Like I have a belief that life supports that which supports life.
Mm, right
Life
on.
supports that which supports life. And the more we found a way to support life around us, the more life has supported us abundantly.
Abundantly. It's a that's you kind of you caused me pause there because I'm like, that's really the epitome of being outward focused, and I believe it's what not just entrepreneurs but highly successful entrepreneurs for sure, but highly successful people in any walk, whether that's corporate, whether that's the nonprofit sector, in religion, right? It's ultimately whose life will be better because I lived here, whose life will be better because I make this contribution. Obviously, there are those who they're just in it for themselves, but that's they're likely not tuned into this either. They're not tuned in to this show, right? So we don't really have to address them, right?
Hold on.
Okay,
Sometimes we had
okay.
a person. I was teaching on a cruise ship, 25 days, 10 countries. We had a little pod of like 30 people every day. We were teaching a class, and they came with us on the trip. And this woman walked by and kind of observed, and then sat
Hmm.
down in the back and listened, and then really liked what she heard one day and said, "Can I join the group?" We're like, yeah, of
Mm.
course. So we got her in, and she was an unexpected last minute join on day 10 or something of the trip, or 5. And she was wonderful. She enjoyed the exercises. She did the material. She worked through the workbook and all the classes. And then one day we did it in spiral dynamics, she would be a high orange, an achiever, someone who had the fancy bags and had the vacation home and had all the cars and lived in Scottsdale and the whole thing. And she
Hmm.
came with us. We went and did a volunteer trip in Guatemala where we were building a school and repainting houses for local families who struggled in Guatemala. And after that day, we came back and we did a share. What was your day like? What did you experience? And her shell cracked open. She says,
Mm.
this was the single greatest day of my entire life. And she was in her probably late 50s, early 60s. The single greatest day of my entire life. I have never felt this level of joy in my entire life. I've accomplished a lot. My husband and I have done very well. We do all these things. We have all these stuff. I've never felt this way in my life. I feel joy, not just satisfied or happy or content, but joy. And she's like, God, I can't explain this to people, but I wish more people would feel it. And what ended up happening, fast forward, we got to a port in Mexico where she has her vacation home, and she went to go hang out with all of her friends, and they're talking about their Birkin bags and vacation and golf strokes and all this stuff. And she came back to the ship and was like, I don't think I relate to them anymore. I would, oh no,
Mm.
I've definitely felt that way before. and
Wow.
and we
Wow.
talked about it. I said, what changed? And her whole perception on that day went from me to we. It went from all the things she thought she needed to get for herself to be successful, for her to feel good about her life, for her to be important, for her to be part of her group, all of a sudden looking outside of herself and saying, wow, I can do so much for the world around me. I can do so much for someone standing right next to me. And that shift from me to we brought so much joy into her life that she had never experienced before, ever. 50, 60 years old, never experienced that kind of joy.
Mm. Mm.
And so
Mm.
it's that process where not only you benefit and you get to, like you were saying, cross that line and become successful, achieve the things you want, have the life you desire, but at some point you realize it's not just about what you want out of life. And when that clicks, you get a level of joy that very few people seem to experience.
And thank you for that, right? Because it's also at that point, right, that it becomes a calling,
Yeah.
right? You
It
you asked
becomes a
earlier,
positive addiction.
right, right.
I mean,
And you're in the beginning
it's
of
a,
the call, yeah, yeah. You were like,
yeah.
how do you know it becomes a calling? And you've helped me clarify that. Frankly, it's more of a calling when it's no longer just for me.
Yeah.
When it's not just my success, but I feel this sense of obligation or
Mhm.
responsibility because it'll benefit other people. That's great stuff. Great stuff. Great stuff.
I love it. I love it. Well, I think our time is close. So I'm going to ask for a final message because I think we could go on all day sharing all
I'm
this,
telling
and
you.
I'm enjoying it. But I'll be respectful of your time. Question: if we were to wrap this up in a bow, if we were to put it on a platter for everyone watching, what is a message every single one can take away? And I'll recap real quick. If you want to make a
Oh,
change in your life, change the environment, take action, get comfortable with feedback, step in and get comfortable with the results, take the results, gather more feedback, continue to change the environment, continue to take action, continue to gather more, feedback and results. Follow those steps and it'll help you cross that line. But if we were to put a final message on this for everyone, what would it be?
it is, I think, where I'm most passionate is about resilience as a quality and a necessary for life achievement. It's understanding that no one gets exonerated from the struggle, and transformation requires that a price be paid.
That's right.
Resilience is your ability to bounce back. How quickly, how fast you bounce back gives you a competitive advantage over everyone else. The speed with which you bounce back can measure the level of success for you and the for you and the people who will benefit because you do. Sometimes, life knocks us down, and we often hear of post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, very real thing. And it's not just reserved for those who fought valiantly or military men and women, but a diagnosis can be traumatic. A loss of a loved one can be traumatic. A
Yeah.
loss of a job can be a traumatic experience. So it's not just reserved for military and war.
Yeah.
But we oftentimes talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. We less often talk about post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic
Mm.
growth is when, adversity hits or challenge comes, and you don't just bounce back and get back to where you were. You go further than you've ever been before. You
Yeah.
hear people talk about post-traumatic growth when they say things like, man, the best thing that ever happened to me was losing my job because my
Mm.
back was against the wall and I had to figure it out. And that's what led me to start my business.
That's right.
Or, it didn't feel like it in the moment, but that breakup was good for me
Yeah.
because as a result of that, I raised my standards, and I oftentimes say your life won't change until your standards do. Your
That's right.
life is not going to change while you continue to accept what is less than you. And
That's right.
so you can experience post-traumatic growth. And
Mm.
and that is through resilience and being willing and having the skills necessary to bounce back from adversity and challenge. My belief is that every individual has something to offer the world. And through our life experiences, we've been silenced. And the
Mm.
hope is that you'll see a contribution that you can make that doesn't just benefit you, but it benefits others, so much so that you're called to go out and do what's necessary in order to make that happen.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you, sir. And if people want to connect with you, if they want to learn more, if they want to attend one of your upcoming workshops or work with you personally, where can we send them?
Well, thank you for that. Primarily, courtlandwarren.com is my website, but all of the channels on Facebook and on Instagram, it's Courtland Warren, and I promise to not inundate you with things that I don't believe are valuable. So if you choose to follow, just know that if I release anything, it's because I believe that it's of value to you. I think that time is our most valuable asset. Leadership is what we do with it. So if you'll follow me there, and I would appreciate it. But Jarek, I don't want this to end without edifying you for the work that you've done in the industry. Who you are in the industry and the contribution that you make in this industry. One that I fell in love with, 2 decades ago. Thank you for the labor of love that is transformation. To see a person bigger than they see themselves, to contribute to them in such a way that they reveal to themselves a person that they've never met. That's the work that you do. That's what
Yeah.
you contribute to the world. And I want to just encourage you to not stop because it's working. It has assisted people like me. And if it's assisted me, if what you have done has assisted me, it means you've also assisted thousands and thousands of people. So I want you to hear that directly from me as a person in the industry. What you do is phenomenal. And thank you for this invitation. And I'll know if it was successful if I ever get invited back. If I don't hear from you again,
Invite you back.
that'll be my
We'll
feedback if I
definitely
never hear
invite
from
you
you
back.
again. So thank you very
My
much. I
my
appreciate it.
my addiction is seeing greatness in others, and I always say
Mm,
sometimes I want that greatness to come out of them more than they do, but I will
mm.
keep going at it until I get it out of them eventually.
You're doing that. You're doing that. I mean, it's awesome, and the work that you're doing with Success Magazine. I mean, we didn't really go into that today, but just following that magazine and knowing what that's about, and knowing the history of it, and knowing that you're leading that charge. It's just I'm honored. I'm honored to have had some time with you, and this interview today is evidence that thoughts become things. And so, thank you for assisting me in that today. I appreciate it.
So welcome. So welcome. Well, thank you all for tuning in. We hope you have an amazing morning, evening, afternoon, wherever in the world you're tuning in from. And tune back in. We'll see you for another episode coming soon.